James Callahan walked into the ballroom with a calm smile on his face. The air smelled of fresh flowers and polished wood. Crystal chandeliers hung low from the high ceiling. Each light sparkled like a star in a dark sky. Soft music played in the background, a gentle melody that made people sway in small groups. Waiters passed by on silent feet, carrying silver trays with tiny hors d'oeuvres. Glasses of golden champagne floated through the crowd like bubbles in a dream. James was used to nights like this. He had built his fortune from a small investment firm into a large enterprise that reached around the world. He wore a tailored, black suit that fit him perfectly. His tie was a deep shade of blue, almost matching the color of his eyes. He carried himself with quiet confidence, noting the room with calm interest, noting the bright gowns, the polished shoes, and the warm laughter. A year ago, James had never dreamed of parties like this. He remembered the nights he spent alone in his first office, watching the city lights through a dusty window. He remembered the cold coffee and the endless phone calls. Slowly, he built his business, learned to trust his instincts, and found success. But that success came at a cost. He lost time with friends, he missed family dinners, and he pushed away the one person who had believed in him when he had nothing. James paused by a tall window that looked out onto the quiet street below. He could see the tops of old town buildings, their red bricks glowing in the soft light of street lamps. Cool breeze brushed his face when he opened the window a little. He took a breath and let his mind drift back to a time when he had less money but more joy. He saw Maya's face and his memory. She had long, dark hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her eyes were bright with laughter and challenge. She had stood in front of him one warm summer evening, wearing a green sundress that swayed with each step. She had told him he was dreaming too small, that life was more than numbers and deals. He had laughed and kissed her then, feeling hope in his chest, but that hope had faded. James had thrown himself into work. He told himself he was doing this for their future. He worked long hours, missing late-night talks and weekend outings. Maya grew frustrated. She wanted children, a home. Filled with light and laughter, James promised he would make time once the business was safe. But every month brought a new challenge. The office lights stayed on late, while Maya's hands went to her empty belly and then to his shoulder, asking when he would come home. Tonight, as he watched the party swirl around him, James felt that old ache. He felt the loss of the simple. Nights when he had sat beside Maya under the stars, talking about dreams and fears, that man felt a mix of hope and fear. This man felt only pride and regret. A soft bell rang, and the music shifted. A string quartet began a lively tune that sent more people onto the small dance floor. Some older guests clapped to the beat. Younger couples held each other close. James stepped aside to let a group pass by. He noticed two women talking near. The bar they pointed toward him, then giggled and turned back to their own conversation. He raised his glass and smiled politely, but inside he felt a flicker of something he could not name. Memories of Maya often made him quiet. He had chosen his career path and lost something precious. But these thoughts never stopped him before. Tonight, he intended to enjoy the evening, to focus on connections that would help his work. He would speak with a potential investor, greet old friends, and maybe even make a new contact. Parties like this were where deals happened, where ideas crossed paths like dancers in a waltz. He set his drink down on a small table and looked around again. He saw a waiter glide by, offering trays of cold shrimp and tiny sandwiches. The shrimp sparkled with a hint of lemon. James hesitated, then took one and savored its flavor. The taste was fresh and light, small pleasure in a world of pressure. He moved slowly toward a group of business associates, men and women in crisp suits and elegant dresses. He greeted each with a firm handshake and a warm tone. They asked about his latest projects, the expansion plans, and the charity initiative he had announced last month. He answered confidently, showing charts on his phone and describing his vision for growth. He felt the familiar thrill when people listened and nodded. Success could feel addictive. It's like a rush of warmth spreading through the chest. But even as he spoke, a small part of him drew back. He watched another couple dance under the soft light. They moved in perfect time, smiling at each other as though the whole room existed for their moment. James wondered if he had ever moved like that, if he had ever felt so free. A soft voice called his name. James, over here. He turned to see his friend Henry, tall and genial, waving from a high-top table. Henry held 2 glasses of champagne, one for himself and one for James. James thanked him and took the glass, feeling the bubbles tickle his nose. "You look deep in thought," Henry said, raising an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" James smiled, just enjoying the view. "It's a beautiful night." Henry nodded. "It is, and you've earned it. You did great work this quarter." James felt a spark of pride. "Thanks. It feels good to celebrate." They clinked glasses and took a sip. The champagne was smooth and lightly sweet. James set his glass down and leaned against the table. He looked at Henry. "Henry, do you ever miss something you can't quite name? It's like you're chasing one thing and forget something else." Henry looked surprised. "What do you mean?" James shrugged. I guess I mean, I've spent years building a life of success. But sometimes I think about the things I left behind. Old friends, simple joys, someone I loved." Henry considered. He had known James since college days, before money became their world. He remembered the nights they had sat on a small balcony, sharing stories and dreams. He nodded slowly. "I get it. But you can find balance. You still have time." James smiled at his friend's kindness. "Maybe tonight just feels different." Henry patted his shoulder. "Well, if there's anyone who can figure it out, it's you. But maybe start by having fun at this party." James laughed softly. "Okay, I'll try." He stepped back into the flow of guests, letting the music guide him. He spoke with an old client, then laughed at a funny story a young entrepreneur shared. He nodded at a proposal for a new investment. He even took a small bite of blue cheese on a cracker, despite usually avoiding strong flavors. As the string quartet finished their set, a hush fell over the room. A bell rang again, and a voice came over the speakers, welcoming guests and hinting at a special evening ahead. James felt a sudden spark of curiosity. He glanced at his watch. It was still early. The night stretched ahead like a road waiting to be traveled. He stepped toward the center of the room, ready to see what surprises might come. Could not have guessed then how this night would change everything he thought he knew. For now, he simply stood there in his favorite world of suits and champagne, feeling a small flutter of something that might be hope, might be the first stirrings of regret softened by possibility. James held his champagne glass gently as the music faded and voices lowered around him. The soft clinking of glasses and quiet laughter filled the room like whispers in the air. The evening was moving slowly, like a beautiful painting in motion. He leaned against a tall golden pillar, watching people walk by in elegant gowns and polished shoes. Everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, but his eyes were searching for something he couldn't name. Then, someone caught his attention. Across the room, standing near the floral arrangement beside the large staircase, was a woman in a simple but elegant black dress. She wasn't trying to grab attention, yet she held it. She stood tall, graceful, and composed, her head slightly tilted as she smiled at the people around her. Beside her was a young boy older than 7 or 8. The boy held her hand tightly and looked around with curious eyes, clutching a small toy car. James stared for a moment longer. His heart paused. Something about that woman seemed familiar. The way she stood, the way her hair curled gently at the ends, the way her smile held both softness and strength, all reminded him of someone. His eyebrows lifted slightly as realization crept into his mind. He leaned toward Henry, who had returned with another glass of wine. "Hey," James whispered, nodding toward the woman and the child. "Does that lady look familiar to you?" Henry turned and followed his gaze. After a pause, he squinted slightly and said, "She does, actually. Isn't that Maya?" "Duh." James blinked, then let out a surprised chuckle. "You're kidding?" "No, I think it's her," Henry said. "But she looks so different. More confident, elegant." James shook his head slowly, still smiling. "Wow. Maya? It's been, what, 9, maybe 10 years?" Henry nodded, at least. James watched her for a few more seconds, then turned his attention to the boy beside her. He had curly hair and bright, thoughtful eyes. He looked curious and intelligent, and something about his face made James stop laughing. The boy had a familiar look. It wasn't just his face, but the way. He held his mouth when he was serious, the way his eyes scanned the room, taking in everything. James saw something in him that he recognized deep in his bones. He looked at Henry again and whispered with a smirk, "Do you see that kid? He kind of looks like me." Henry chuckled. "Oh no, don't tell me you're starting to think." James laughed and waved the thought away. "Relax. I'm just joking. It's probably just my imagination." But the thought stuck. Not because he really believed it, but because it made the moment amusing. He took another sip of his drink and shook his head again, still smiling. Imagine that. Me, a father. What a twist. Henry raised an eyebrow. "Stranger things have happened." James laughed again, a soft, deep laugh that turned a few heads nearby. He didn't care. He felt entertained by the idea. It gave the evening an unexpected flavor, like finding a childhood photo in an old drawer. Funny, strange, and oddly touching. But beneath the laughter, something else stirred, a quiet discomfort. He hadn't seen Maya in years. Not since their final argument, when she had walked away from him with tears in her eyes and strength in her steps. He remembered that day clearly. He had just signed a major deal, the biggest of his career back then, and had been too caught up in celebrating to notice Maya's breaking heart. She had wanted to talk. She had told him she couldn't wait forever, that she needed more than promises. She needed presence, attention, care. James, high on success, had brushed her off, telling her that once the next deal was done, they'd take that vacation. Once the next round of funding came through, they could start planning a family. Always later, never now. And now, here she was. Not broken, not bitter, just better, stronger. Like someone who had walked through a storm and come out on the other side holding her head higher. James felt a strange mix of feelings. Pride that she had become someone admired. Regret that he hadn't noticed her strength sooner. Curiosity about what her life had become. Still, he kept his posture relaxed, his smile easy. That was his way. Never let emotions show too much in public. Always keep the surface calm, like the still water of a lake hiding the currents. Below, he watched as Maya spoke with another guest, her hand still gently resting on the boy's shoulder. She laughed at something, and the sound made James's heart flutter unexpectedly. It wasn't romantic, not anymore. Something else, something like respect. Suddenly the room shifted. A man in a black tuxedo stepped onto a small stage near the head of the ballroom and tapped the microphone. The soft sound rang across the room, and conversation slowly died down. Music faded and people turned toward the front. James, still leaning casually, took a final sip of champagne and looked up with interest. "Ladies and gentlemen," the man said with a smile, "thank you for joining us tonight for this very special gathering. Before we continue, it is my great pleasure to introduce our event host, the woman whose vision and effort made this entire evening possible." The man stepped aside and extended his arm toward the staircase. James's eyes widened. The woman in the black dress, the woman he had been quietly laughing about, began to walk forward. It was Maya. Maya was the host. She walked slowly but confidently toward the front. The room erupted in applause, though many guests looked surprised. James stood still, stunned. His smirk vanished. The joke he had whispered earlier now felt sour in his mouth. She smiled at the crowd, not missing a step. Her voice came through the microphone, clear and steady. "Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored to have you here tonight for this event. It's a cause that's very close to my heart, and I can't wait to share it with you." Move. He felt a strange weight settle on his chest. He remembered every word he had said earlier, every laugh, every joke about her and the child beside her. And now, the child stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, watching his mother speak. With admiration, Henry leaned close and whispered, "Well, this just got interesting." James didn't respond. His mind raced. He remembered Maya's kindness, her dreams, her strength. He remembered how he had once promised to support her, to build something together. and now she had built something without him. He watched as Maya thanked a few people and shared how the event would support families and children who needed help starting over. She mentioned how personal this cause was for her. James heard every word, but it all sounded like echoes in a fog. What hit him most was not her success, was her peace. Maya looked content. She wasn't looking for praise. She wasn't trying to show off. She simply stood there with quiet power, full of purpose. And suddenly, James felt very small. He had laughed earlier. He had joked. But now, as the spotlight shone on her and the guests listened with full attention, he saw the truth. Maya didn't need to prove anything. She had already become the person he once claimed he didn't have time for. James stood in the back of the room, watching her shine, and for the first time that evening, he didn't feel like the most important man in the room. James couldn't take his eyes off her. The sound of the crowd clapping still echoed in the hall, but he hardly heard it. Maya stood under the warm lights of the stage, her calm smile shining more brightly than any of the chandeliers above her. Her voice was full of grace and purpose as she continued speaking to the guests. The room, once buzzing with chatter and movement, had grown quiet and respectful. Everyone was listening. She looked different from the girl he remembered. Older, yes, but not tired. She looked powerful. Her words were clear and confident. She spoke about second chances, about building better futures for children, about helping single parents who were starting over. She shared how this charity event wasn't just about raising money, it was about giving hope. James stood frozen. The joke he had made earlier about her and the boy now echoed in his head, but it no longer seemed funny. His smile had completely faded. He felt something heavy grow in his chest, like a quiet shame sitting just beneath his ribs. He had laughed without knowing anything about her life now, he had assumed, and he had been wrong, as Maya continued. Speaking, she turned toward the crowd and introduced someone. This young man, she said proudly, is my son Lucas. He is the reason I wake up every morning with determination in my heart. Lucas stepped forward a little shyly. At the crowd, the guests smiled warmly and clapped again. Some women placed their hands on their hearts. Others whispered how adorable he looked. Lucas gave a small smile and then quietly stepped back beside the stage. James's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the boy again. The eyes, the jawline, the way he stood silently, but observantly, wasn't just imagination. The resemblance was there, wasn't loud, but it was strong enough to make James question everything. Could it be? He turned to Henry with a look that was now full of surprise and uncertainty. Henry raised his eyebrows. You still think it was just a joke? James didn't answer. He remembered that final argument with Maya so clearly now. She had cried not in anger, but in heartbreak. She had told him, one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just lose, you lost everything I offered you. Love, a home, a family. At the time, he was too focused on his business deals. He thought she was being dramatic. He thought she'd come back. But she didn't. She had walked away and never returned. And now, all these years later, here, she was hosting a grand event, standing with a son that looked like he could be James's. And James hadn't known. Not until now. The applause died down, and Maya gracefully stepped off the stage. The music started again, soft and elegant. But the room still held a thoughtful hush. Guests returned to their drinks and conversations, but many were still whispering about how inspiring Maya's speech had been. James stayed in place. He didn't move. His mind was racing, heart pounding, hands cold. He watched Maya mingle with guests, hugging a few, shaking hands with others. She looked completely at ease, as though this had always been her world. She hadn't seen him yet. Or if she had, she hadn't reacted. James was torn. Part of him wanted to walk over and speak to her, to say something, anything. Another part of him wanted to turn around and leave, to escape the weight of the past now pressing down on him like a heavy coat. But he knew he couldn't walk away. Not this time. Slowly, almost nervously, James began moving toward the back of the room. following the soft trail of her voice as she spoke to guests. She was standing near a display of pictures of children and families, showing before and after moments. Photos of people helped by Maya's foundation. There were smiles, hugs, graduation caps, new homes. James stood behind a column, watching quietly. Then Maya turned on, saw him. For a moment, her smile froze. Her eyes met his. There was no anger in her gaze, no surprise either, just a stillness, a quiet strength. James took a breath and stepped forward. "Maya," he said softly. She didn't speak at first. She looked at him with calm eyes, then gave a small, polite nod. "James." He smiled awkwardly, unsure what to say next. "It's been a long time." "Yes," she said. "It has. I didn't know. You were the host tonight." "Clearly," she replied, her voice even, her tone neither cold nor warm. "I also didn't know about your son." Maya looked over at Lucas, who was now playing near the photo display with another child. "Yes, Lucas is 8. James's throat felt dry. 8. That lined up with the time she had walked away as he. She turned her eyes back to him, and he stopped mid-sentence. She didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, she asked, "Why are you here tonight, James?" He blinked. "A friend invited me." "I had no idea it was your event. I'm glad I came. It's beautiful. In your speech it was powerful." She looked at him for a moment longer, then gave a small smile. "Thank you." He shifted on his feet, nervous. I said something earlier, a joke, about you, and about the boy. I didn't know. I didn't mean it to hurt. I'm sorry." Maya nodded slowly. "It's okay. You didn't know. Maybe you should ask yourself why your first instinct was to laugh." James swallowed hard. Her words were calm, but they struck deep. "I guess I've spent so long thinking everything's a game," he said quietly. "Success, parties, even the past. I didn't think I'd be facing it like this." Maya studied his face for a few moments. Then she said, "Lucas is my world. He's the reason I work so hard now, the reason I built this foundation. Had to become strong for him, and I did." James nodded. "I can see that. You've done something amazing. I mean it." Maya looked down for a moment, then back at him. "I didn't come here tonight to relive the past. But I'm not running from it either. Life gave me a second chance. I took it. I didn't wait for someone to offer it." Her voice was steady, not angry, just honest. James felt something shift inside him. He'd always believed he was the one who moved forward, who succeeded, who made the right choices. But now he saw the truth. Maya had built a life with meaning, a life he had never even tried to imagine. Before he could speak again, someone called Maya's name from across the room. She turned. "I need to greet the donors. Please excuse me." James stepped aside. Of course. She walked away with grace, her dress moving gently as she moved toward the next group of guests. Lucas turned and looked at James curiously, then followed his mother. James stood still, the room spinning slowly around him. The music returned. To full volume, glasses clinked. People laughed. But inside James, everything had changed. He wasn't the man he thought he was, and Maya wasn't the girl he had left behind. He had seen something real tonight, and now he had to decide what to do with it. James stepped onto a small balcony just off the ballroom, the music and chatter fading behind him. The night air felt cool against his skin. He leaned on the railing for a moment, looking out at the city lights. The glow of the skyline reminded him of nights he and Maya once shared, talking until dawn. He tightened his grip on the railing, trying to steady his racing heart. He had to face her again. He traced the edge of the balcony floor with his foot and took a breath, steadying himself for what he needed to say. A gentle voice came from behind him. "James." He turned and saw Maya standing a few feet away, her arms folded gently. The soft light from the lantern overhead caught the curve of her face. She looked calm but curious. He noticed the way her dress moved in the breeze and the quiet strength in her posture. He swallowed, searching for words. "May I join you?" he asked. She nodded once, and he moved to stand beside her, both of them looking out at the lights. Turned to her, hesitation in his eyes. I'm sorry, he said softly. The words felt strange on his tongue after so many years. Maya looked at him, silent, giving him space to continue. I was wrong to laugh earlier, he said, referring to the cruel joke about her and her son. I didn't know. I saw you. In that dress and I thought it was just for fun. But I was thoughtless. I hurt you without knowing your story. He paused, shame burning his cheeks. I'm sorry for everything I did. Maya's eyes held understanding, but no quick forgiveness. She crossed her arms and looked at the world below. I appreciate your apology, she said quietly. You were a different person back then. We both were young, full of dreams and mistakes. But jokes at someone's expense are not easy to forgive. She shifted her weight, then turned to face him. I spent years rebuilding my life. I found strength I didn't know I had. I learned to stand on my own 2 feet for Lucas's sake. James listened, every word settling deep in his mind. He felt regret for the pain he had caused. Admire what you've built, he said. This foundation you started the work? You do. It's incredible. You took a broken dream and made it something real. I only wish I had seen it sooner. He looked down at his shoes, remembering the nights he chose work over her. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke. I didn't value you then. I thought success would fill the empty space. It never did. Maya's expression softened, but did not melt. Lucas is my focus now, she said, is the reason I opened my heart again, the reason I worked so hard, found purpose in helping others because I wanted him to grow up in a world that cares. I became someone I'm proud to be, with or without you. She paused and let the breeze carry her words into the night. That life belonged to us once, but it's over. He stepped closer, careful not to cross any lines. The memory of their last stormy night came back, the slammed door, her tears, his empty promises fading into the shadows. I understand, he said. You needed more than words. You needed me to be there. I failed you. I failed us. He took a steadying breath. I can't change the past, but I want to make things right now. If there is any way I can help, I will. Maya looked at him, her gaze steady and clear. I don't need you to fix anything anymore, she said softly. I fixed myself. I learned to be strong for both of us. That strength comes from within, not from anyone else's support. She paused, then spoke more gently. Your offer is kind, but I need to walk this path alone. I hope you can respect that. James felt a pang of sadness and relief at the same time. Sadness for the distance between them, relief that she spoke honestly. I respect that, he said. I will step back. He gave her a small nod, the only gesture he could offer. Thank you for listening to me. Maya gave a small, almost sad smile. I'm glad you came tonight, she said. It was brave to face this. She looked out at the city lights again, then back at him. I hope you find what you're searching for. Her words were gentle but firm, like a hand guiding him to leave. He nodded, feeling the weight lift from his shoulders. He took one last look at her, at the woman who had become someone he could only admire from afar. Goodbye, Maya, he said softly. She did not reply. She just turned and walked back into the ballroom, leaving him on the balcony with the night wind and the distant hum of music. James stayed on the balcony for a long moment, breathing in the cool air. The city lights glowed like a promise of a new start. He thought about Maya's strength, the pain she had overcome. He thought about Lucas and the son he had never known. He felt a deep shift inside him, as if a heavy stone had been removed from his chest. He stepped back inside the ballroom, the noise washing over him in waves. He felt changed. The part of him that had chased success at all costs fell silent. In its place rose a quiet determination to live differently. He moved through the crowd, his stance more humble than before, his smile genuine instead of practiced. As he walked past guests, he heard fragments of laughter and saw couples dancing. He felt like a stranger in his own world. But this stranger felt more alive, more aware of what truly mattered. He held his glass of champagne loosely, not for show but for comfort. He scanned the room for Henry, spotting him near the bar. Henry gave him a curious look. James raised his glass in a simple toast. Henry returned the gesture. James drank slowly. tasting the cool sweetness without urgency. In that moment, James realized that apologies matter, that true strength comes from facing your mistakes. Felt ready to rebuild parts of his life he had ignored. He thought of Maya and Lucas, and he silently wished them well. He would not interrupt her more. He would honor her boundaries. But he carried a promise in his heart: to be a better man, someone who could offer respect, kindness, and presence. As the night moved on, James stepped away from the edge of the party and toward a future shaped by his new understanding. James left the balcony feeling lighter than he had in years. The night air had cooled his skin, and with each breath, he felt a bit of the past fall away. He made his way back into the grand ballroom, where the music still played and guests still chatted in small circles. Everything looked the same, yet he saw it with new eyes. He noticed the warm glow of the chandeliers, the careful arrangements of flowers on each table, and the soft smiles on people's faces as they spoke about Maya's speech. He felt a tug at his heart, a mix of pride and hope that he could be part of something better now. He walked toward the donation table, where supporters dropped envelopes filled with checks or cash. A young woman in a navy dress stood there, handing out small thank you cards. James paused, watching her work.
Our neighbor.
He remembered how nervous he felt earlier, standing beside Maya and Lucas. Now he felt a shift inside him. He wanted to help.
He reached
into his suit pocket, pulled out his wallet, and took a blank envelope from the pile. He wrote his name on a card, then placed it on the table. When the woman looked up, he handed her a heavier envelope. "I'd like to match tonight's proceeds," he said softly. Her eyes widened in surprise. "Mr. Callahan, this is very generous, please," he said, offering a small smile. "Tell Maya I'm honored to help." The woman nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. "Thank you. She'll be so grateful."
Ow.
Into the secure box, James stepped back, folding his hands. He watched as guests continued to give. Some recognized him and smiled. He gave them nods of respect. He moved through the crowd more slowly than before, listening to the hushed conversations. He heard people expressing admiration. "She really cares. This will change lives. I'm so glad we came." Each comment was like a note in a symphony of hope. He felt proud of Maya, of what she had built without him. Across the room, near the staircase, Maya stood with a small group of volunteers. Lucas played quietly at her side, drawing shapes in a notebook while listening to her talk about the next steps for the foundation. He looked up when he saw James and offered a shy wave. James smiled and raised his hand in return, stepped forward, weaving through the guests until he reached Maya's circle. She turned and smiled politely. He felt his heart catch at the sight of her again. She looked radiant, her posture graceful, her eyes full of purpose. He remembered how lost he had been before, and how she had found her way. "Maya," he said quietly. She gave a quick nod. "James." He hesitated, then spoke with purpose. "I matched the donations tonight. I want to support this work. You and Lucas deserve all the help you can get." Maya's eyes softened. "Thank you. That means a lot." She paused and looked at her son, then back at James. "Lucas, this is James. He helped the foundation tonight." Lucas closed his notebook and stepped forward. He held out his hand, looking at James with honest curiosity. "Hello, Mr. Callahan," he said softly. James knelt to Lucas's level. "Hello, Lucas. It's nice to meet you." He shook the boy's hand gently. "I've heard great things about you." Lucas smiled shyly. "Thank you." Maya watched the exchange and nodded. "Thank you for stepping in tonight. I know it wasn't easy." Her voice was calm, but he heard gratitude in it. James stood. It wasn't easy, but it felt right. He looked at her. "You've built something incredible here. I'm proud of you." She smiled, and for a moment they shared a peaceful silence. Then she said, "There's still much to do. Volunteers are needed to sort these envelopes and send thank you notes." She gestured toward the table piled with cards and letters. "Would you like to help finish up?" James nodded. "I would." He rolled up his sleeves and joined the volunteers. They worked side by side, opening envelopes, counting donations, and organizing thank you cards. Maya moved among them, guiding people with gentle authority. James watched her in action and felt admiration swell inside him. She was not the person who had walked away heartbroken. She was someone whose sadness had become strength, loss had become purpose. As they worked, Lucas joined in, handing James envelopes to open and cards to stack. James smiled at the boy's eagerness. He took Lucas's small hand in his during a slow moment. "Thank you for helping, buddy," he said quietly. Lucas nodded and returned his focus to the task. James realized then that he cared deeply for this child, even if they were not related by blood. He felt a protective warmth, a wish to be kind and supportive. After they finished sorting, Maya clapped her hands to get everyone's attention.
"Thank you, everyone,"
she said. "Because of your help tonight, we'll be able to support more families than ever before." She paused, looking around at the group of volunteers. "This is only the beginning. I hope you'll join me in the work ahead." People nodded, murmured agreements, and smiled. Maya turned to James and gave him a small, genuine smile. Gay returned, it with hope in his eyes. He felt a new chapter beginning, not just for Maya and Lucas, but for himself. Later, as guests began to leave, James approached Maya again. The room had quieted, with only a few guests lingering at the bar. Lucas was drawing once more in his notebook, his small pencil moving softly. Maya stood beside him, watching him with a mother's careful eyes. James cleared his throat. "Maya, before you go, I wanted to give you something." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crisp envelope, different from the donation ones. He handed it to her. A letter. "I wrote it earlier today. I didn't know how to say everything. In person."
Aya.
Took the envelope with gentle surprise. "Thank you. I'll read it later." James nodded, feeling shy but honest. "I just wanted you to know I'm truly sorry for the past, and that I hope we can find a way to respect each other, even if our lives are different now." She gave him a nod of understanding. "I'll read it," she said softly. Then she turned to Lucas. "Come on, love. Let's go." Lucas closed his notebook and slipped his small hand into hers. Maya gave James a final look, full of calm acceptance. "Thank you for your help tonight." Then she led her son away. Through the softly lit archways and toward the waiting car outside, James watched them go, his heart full. He felt a gentle warmth in his chest, a mix of relief, pride, and hope. He knew his story with Maya had changed forever. It was no longer about lost love or missed chances. It was about respect, kindness, and moving forward. He gathered his coat and stepped outside into the cool night air. The city lights glowed around him. He paused for a moment, imagining how he would write his letter. He pictured Maya opening the envelope later, reading his words in the quiet of her home. He hoped she would see his care and respect as he walked to his car. He thought about the promise he made to himself, to be present, to be kind, to value what truly matters. He had chased success for so long that he nearly forgot how to live. With heart, later that night, James sat at his large desk in his penthouse office. The city below pulsed with lights. He placed the letter he had written in the envelope, sealed it, and set it on his desk. Then he picked up his pen and wrote one last line. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." He folded the paper neatly and tucked it away for morning delivery. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes, feeling contentment he had never felt from a business win. He felt the promise of a new day, of a new way of living. Success could wait. Tonight, he had discovered something more important: respect, empathy, and the courage to change. And that discovery was worth more than any fortune.